Hi there, this is Richard here again, and today we're going to do Revelation chapter 2. Well, at least we're going to start on it. So, Revelation chapter 2 is all about the first four letters to the seven churches. Um, what? So we'll talk. I'll talk a little bit about it first of all before we dive into the actual Bible itself. This is a literal picture of historical churches that actually were in Asia Minor, or what is now modern day Turkey. It's a letter to all of those churches and to individual things that were happening within those churches at the time. Also, most people tend to agree, so I'm going to mention it, and I kind of go along with this, but you know, not to 100% probably, but I can see where it applies, and I can see that it makes sense, and there's compelling evidence to suggest this. So what they're suggesting that because of the order of the churches, and because they go in a clockwise rotation in terms of the first church being Ephasus and the last church being Laodicea, and it goes in a clockwise direction. And also, if they were in any other different order from the order that they're in, then the perspective that this is a historical, prophetic explanation of different periods of church history. So, what I'll do is I'll show you now on the map, and you'll see that it goes round. So that'll be one map, and then on the other map I'm going to talk about the map that you'll see. Okay, so you'll just see the churches on the map and you can see where they are. So we're going to start off. So this is a literal letter to the seven churches. And you'll notice that the letter to the churches, it is addressed to the messenger or the angel of the church. You can interpret that as the angel of the church, or to the actual pastor or the person who is in charge of the church, the leader of the church, perhaps. First of all, there's a statement about Jesus that is made to them. There's a statement about addressing the condition of the church as it stands. There's a pronouncement regarding that condition. Then there's an instruction from Jesus to that particular church. Then there's a general exhortation and a promised reward as a result of that. So I'm hoping, I'll just leave that. Okay, so let's start off in the first church, which is the church in Ephesus. And then I'll also talk about, at the end of this, I'll talk about where in the prophetic historical pattern, obviously it comes first, the church of Ephesus is. So the term Ephesus, the actual word itself, it means desirable. In actual fact, it was like a term of endearment, which is quite appropriate given the main message to this church. There was a very large temple to Diana in Ephesus, as we heard about in the book of Acts. And it was in fact one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. Go figure. So it was about a 20,000, get your head around this, 20,000 square meters. That's huge. Platform. It was 150 meters long and 75 meters wide. It was huge. And also it had 60-foot columns just to hold it up. So it must have been pretty tall as well. And Ephesus was also considered to be a center for the study of arts and magic. It was called the Queen of Asia. And at the time that this letter is written by John, Ephesus was quite a major trading port But as the years went by, it slowly, there was a lot of land erosion, and the whole port got filled up with silt, and it ended up being about 6 kilometers inland. It was a major harbour, a major centre between Rome, so it was a major hub between Rome and all of the eastern provinces. Some interesting points about the church at Ephesus. It's I don't know if there's conclusive evidence for this, but after John was exiled, he was exiled to Patmos. After he was let go, whenever Domitian finished his reign, which was in AD 96, after that it is said that he went to Ephesus and became the leader of the church at Ephesus, which is also quite interesting because Timothy was sent there by Paul to be the leader of the church at Ephesus. And on top of this, we've got John's, Timothy's, and Mary's, the Mother of God, tombs. Their tombs are in Ephesus. Now, bear in mind, this is 35 years after Paul's departure or leaving Ephesus, and he was there for 3 years. So Paul spent a lot of time in Ephesus. Of course, he wrote the letter to the Ephesians. This is all mentioned in Acts and different things that happened there. So this is 35 years after Paul's departure. So it's a pretty far. It's one of the preeminent churches of all the hundreds. So let's just read it and we'll go through. These things says he who holds the 7 stars in his right hand, who walks in the middle of the 7 golden lampstands. So that means that Jesus is both in our midst and also he's holding us in his hand. And that signifies his position of authority. He's in the middle of us, encompassing us, but also he's holding us in the palm of his hand. Verse 2. I know your works and your labor. That's not normal like work, but labor for Jesus. Your patience, or that can be also looked at as patient endurance, and that you cannot bear those who are evil. And you have tested those who say they are apostles and are not, and have found them liars. Okay, so it says that they cannot bear those who are evil, so they wouldn't allow people who are supposed to be believers within the church. Of course, they're not talking about people in the world, because otherwise we would have to associate with nobody, but it's people who are calling themselves believers, and they were part of the church, but they were evil. And you have tested those who are... So this was a big thing of this particular church, is because it was so important in these early days. The church had only been going, 60 years or so, 60 or 70 years. And so they were very strong on doctrine. They were very strong on what the Bible was really saying. Excuse me. And they were very strong on, if somebody said they were an apostle, they were testing it and they were finding out. And also a verse that's in good reference here is 2 Corinthians 11, verse 13, for it says, such men are false apostles, deceitful workmen, disguising themselves as apostles of Christ. So obviously the church in Ephesus was very much, you walked in, you called yourself an apostle, you really had to be an apostle, otherwise it was like, out of here. Verse 3, and you have persevered and have patience, and have labored for my name's sake, and have not become weary. Nevertheless, I have this against you, that you have left you're first in rank, your priority. You've left your first love. Let's just talk about this. This is the main thing of the church in Ephesus. This is God's main concern for them. To leave something is a conscious decision to abandon their first love. So to leave their first love is a conscious decision to leave behind or to abandon their first love, which is the reason you're involved in the first place. This may also, there's some thoughts that this might not just be talking about their love for God, but also because John, remember, was one of the leaders of this place, but also their love for one another. John emphasizes all the time in his letters and also in the gospel, we must love one another. So maybe he's also talking about that. Perhaps what he was saying, I think, what he's probably saying is they're becoming too busy on work for the king and they're not having time for the king or each other. They're forgetting that Jesus is in charge of both the church and their life. Our mission is to share Jesus with the world, but that mission only happens when we are in close relationship with Jesus. The love that Jesus pours into us pours out towards others, to share the gospel, to love our neighbors. We can't do it in and of ourselves. It's something that, God gives us, and then we give out of that, because it all comes from our relationship. It all comes from our intimacy with God.